Hello and welcome to another edition of the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host Alex, and with me I have Logan. How are you, Logan?
Hey Alex, yeah mate, doing pretty well. It's nice to be at the festive end of the year, heading into Christmas, and obviously that means lots of games to watch. It's very warm in Australia at the moment, so yeah, we're definitely winding down the year, and it's exciting times.
I was going to say, I mean, for our English listeners, it must be very strange to think of the end of the year as being quite warm. But yeah, I think it's over 30 degrees where I am. I don't know about you, but yeah, very warm end to the year at the moment. So, but as you say, lots of games to watch. For our Aussie listeners, be in sport seems the thing to get over Christmas. Even if it's just for a month or so, it seems like we've got a lot of televised games starting last weekend with QPR. We've got Boro tomorrow morning, I think, is also being. And then Bristol City and a few other games going into Sunderland, I think, in the new year as well. So plenty of football to watch. And unfortunately, we've got a loss to talk about this week with the QPR game, but hopefully more positive signs to come. Let's crack into that QPR game. Sort of talked last week with Mitch about this one being, I suppose, a bit of a banana skin in waiting because QPR had picked up 2 wins in a row. Manager was doing well, sort of turning them around. But also looking at it as a game that really, for us to show our top 6 credentials, it needed to be one that we put away and got the 3 points from, which wasn't the case. You can make a case maybe Lakilo going out and Jones as well, celebrating the birth of his child, was out of the side. But weighing it all up, how did you see it? Were you hard not to be disappointed with a loss, but I guess it was one that maybe you could see coming?
Well, I feel like the only reason I could see it coming was because you cursed it in the podcast chat by letting us know quite a few times actually that QPR had turned the corner and had found a run of form just in time to play us, and so from that moment, I feel like there was always going to be, an uphill battle. Road feeling pretty confident, given some of the football that has been played recently. And, if you just took a quick glance at the ladder, QPR are certainly one of those teams that, I say that we have to be putting away. But I found it really interesting. I guess the result itself was one that I thought was kind of, I watched it and was disappointed. But then when I heard Rosenior's post-match conference afterwards, it kind of altered my perspective a little bit. I think it was, as he shared in the conference, was his first back-to-back losses since he was, put in charge of the club.
I was thinking it must have been. I was going to say I can't recall too many times we've lost back-to-back under him, if any. So that, it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, and I think we've had a rich patch or run of draws. So I definitely can't remember back-to-back losses. I know that there's been a loss and a draw, but it's been one of the things that we've been able to see, in recent times, that if we did find ourselves on the back of a loss, then there was always some level of fight back tabled, and it was good to get back on track really quickly. So I think that that's definitely going to be the take on the result at Middlesbrough. They're obviously going to be itching to, right the wrongs of what we saw at the weekend. But Rosenior was overly complimentary, I think, of the actual performance. And it's not that I disagreed with him. I think that we certainly had our moments, and really the goal on half-time was such a momentum swing that really just changed the outlook for the entire match. But it certainly wasn't a performance that I think, in the past when we've lost, we've been able to point towards a terrific performance and, just unlucky on the day. And this was kind of one of those ones where, yes, it was a worldy goal, that was scored, on the stroke of half time that had a huge momentum swing, but they're very disappointing when we conceded the second goal. And I know that people will be really quick to, point Allsop out as the culprit for that. But just a really kind of simple compounding error. You never like seeing those goals go in anyway. But on the back of, that goal on halftime, which really changed the dynamic, to then concede that second one, it was just a game that left a real bitter, taste in your mouth, given the fact that it was, opposition that was so far down the league ladder.
Yeah, it's a really great point, and it's one that when I was watching it live, I wasn't watching it live. I watched it the morning after, but when I was watching the game, I was sort of conflicted between thinking, was it a poor performance, which I think it was in large patches, but then also looking at passages of play where Delap in particular, but also I guess Philogene before he went off injured, Morton as well, Twine as well, pulling out some great saves from Begovic, where you think on another day the keeper doesn't get some of those chances. It was a really tricky game in that sense to rate or review, because I completely agree. Like I thought, especially in that first 30 minutes, I thought McLaughlin looked really rusty and poor. He gave the ball away a number of times. I thought Seri was giving the ball away quite a lot as well. I thought Coyle was probably one of his weaker games as well. And then, as you say, also giving away that second goal to them in the second half. I think there was a lot of individually poor performances. It's such a, but then I look at some of the other performances like Delap, and I think they actually played really well. And on another day, Delap's walking away with the goal, Twine's walking away with the goal, and even McLaughlin at the end had that great chance that Begovic gets fingertips to. So it's a really tricky one in that sense to look at it and think, as you say, I mean, like it's 2 losses in a row for the first time under Rosenior. Really tricky game tomorrow morning against Middlesbrough as well. So potentially you're looking at 3 games in a row, but without feeling like, you look at Watford, you look at QPR, and see what happens with the Middlesbrough game, but potentially 3 games that, we could get results out of that we've got nothing out of. So it's sort of hard to assess in that sense how we're playing. But, it's the story of our season. It's the story of last season as well, in terms of if we don't take our chances, we don't score the goals. And it just seems like it happens almost every week where we'll have these chances and we'll talk about the fact that we've got these nearly chances to score goals and can't make the most of them. I guess also touching on, I mean, you talked there about their first goal, Willock scoring on the stroke of half time, really. Bit of poor defending, 3 players sort of standing around him, switching off and not getting to him to close him down. Was a bit disappointing to see. But then, it's a worldie of a goal, and it's frustrating when you've got that. You've got the Watford goal as well, where I don't know what you do about them.
It's what was so disappointing with that particular goal was, I think if you go back and you count on the replay, there's maybe 7 defenders in the box. And so it was kind of that angled one where the ball, spat out, and he just found enough space on the edge of the box. And you just see a sea of amber. And for him to hit the ball as kind of low and as angled as it was, to get around all of those bodies. And then, I won't say that Allsop was unsighted, because he did kind of move to it late, but it was just one of those goals where you see those chances all the time. And if that had have, sprayed just wide of the target, which you will often see, I do think that you see a very different game in the second half. And it was such a killer in the sense of it took all the kind of the bite out of our attack, or at least it felt that way. And just those positions where you're chasing the game and you kind of find yourself questioning how you're chasing it. I think that was really we were stunned. And I do want to mention, you did touch on it. The keeper performance was absolutely insane from QPR, and that you do get those games. But I think if you want to be a team at the top end of the championship, you do have to find breakthroughs, and sadly for us, we were unable to.
Yeah, and I guess the other big concern for our attack is Philogene going down with that injury. To be honest, whenever I see players going down with a knee injury where it didn't look like anyone was really around him, it was off the ball, it was quite innocuous, I often just assume the worst and think ACL, because usually that'll just be a change of direction or something that it's just buckled the knee. And so as tough as it is seeing that he'll be out for 4 to 6 weeks, I'm actually quite relieved that it's nothing, hopefully nothing more serious. And that we'll see him back fully fit and fresh in 6 weeks. It is really unfortunate timing, because 4 to 6 weeks in September might mean 4 to 6 games, but 4 to 6 weeks in December means, it's like going to be like 10 or 12 games just about, because of the way the games are coming so thick and fast. But it'll be interesting to see how the side steps up without him.
Well, I mean, all of a sudden you start thinking about these players that, we've mentioned that have been largely unsighted, that we had, such high hopes for at the beginning of the year. here's the opportunities. And I think that, Philogene has undoubtedly been our best player, but by a country mile in the performances, and seems to, not just in the way that he's been chipping in and scoring himself, but he seems to spark everything. Just with, like I guess the defensive awareness that when he has the ball at his feet, what it commands, the opportunities that it creates for everyone else, just purely him being there. And I think that's going to be a really interesting one to see how we combat it and how we adjust, because it's going to be, it's, as far as the championship goes, I haven't seen or can't remember a player. I know this is a very shallow comparison, but outside of that season where, Jared Bowen and Kamil Krasicki kind of looked like they were playing in a different league to everybody else who was wearing a Tiger shirt, Jaden Philogene has really stood out far beyond what what I can remember. And so to have such a huge central piece of your side go missing for, as you said, a very congested fixture season, it's going to be a huge battle. But I guess the other thing that you might like to kind of say, if you want to play devil's advocate, is at least there are games that are coming thick and fast. So if you are going to think of ways to put some or implement some kind of fresh strategy, at least the players do have a concentrated period of football to kind of go and work with it. And it might take less time, touch wood, let's hope that that's the case, for them to be able to gel and put those things into place. And I don't have the doubts as far as squad depth and the personnel that we do have, that we can cause teams problems in other ways. It's just that he was in such a rich run of form that it's unfortunate we don't get to see him through this Christmas period.
And look, it can also be, you'd never sort of spin it as a positive, but in the sense that it makes us a bit more unpredictable. Teams were often lining 2 or 3 players up on him to stop him, and basically viewing it as, you nullify Philogene, you nullify Hull. So you think with him out of the side, it makes us a bit more unpredictable in that sense, whether it means, Delat going back to that right wing position that he was playing previous to Philogene coming through, Slater potentially getting a start on the wing if Lakilo's fit, see what he can do. A few different options in those spaces as well. Traore as well. I mean, hasn't looked amazing out wide, but potentially he gets a bit of a chance as well. Will be interesting to see. I guess the other sort of personnel talking point out of this one, we sort of touched on it before, Allsop getting caught out for that second goal. It is a run of goals now that you could say are his responsibility. I know Rosenior is quite quick to sort of put the blame on himself and the style of play he wants from Allsop. And I sort of raised the question with Mitch last week as well. And it's obviously a lot more complicated than just saying it's an Ingram or an Allsop decision and it's a like-for-like switch, because they do play in such a different style. So it's not as simple as just saying, should Allsop be replaced? But do you see it almost as maybe he does just need a breather for his own confidence, or is it, it's always a hard balance of, does dropping a player do more for his confidence, or does it shatter it even more?
It's interesting, because I do think that largely the style that Rosenior is asking us to play, or asking the players to go with, is one that has proven to be effective. I do just think that there is times where the players in executing that need to kind of use that professional judgment. And in that particular situation, I went back, watched the goal a few times to see, at what kind of level of fault can you place on Allsop here? And it just kind of looked like one of those situations where there was 2 defenders closing him down. And, I would be totally fine with him. And I know that's also, I should kind of lead with a caveat here that what I know about football is, not worth knowing in regards to compared to what Liam Rosenior knows and what Allsop knows. But I would have been perfectly fine to see that ball, go back over the halfway line or go over the sideline, get players back, defend. I just don't think that whole playing out all the time only has that 100%. It must be done that way. And I would have liked to have seen, in some of those situations, and obviously when a goal's scored, it's easy to kind of look at things retrospectively, but I would like to see more situations like that in the game prior to a goal being conceded, that it is okay for the players to have the freedom to, just put it back up. And not all the time, like stick with the main course of, we want to try and play out and and look to create space. But if that's the only option, and it does, put the players under an extra level of duress and is leading to these significantly costly errors, then I don't see the reason to make that the plan A, B, and C, which I think is how it's kind of being presented.
So would you make the switch to Ingram, or would you just?
I don't think so. I don't think it's as much as a quick switch, and I would say that because I do think for the goals that we have seen, then the mistakes that have caused the goals, I think that the thing about Allsop that makes it stand out is that was what he was brought to the club to do. So if you quickly make the change and put Ingram back in, well, in some ways you're abandoning the philosophy, which Rosenior's talked about building a culture and has warned about the mistake. So I wouldn't be so quick, and I would be really surprised if Rosenior did go that way, because Allsop's a far better keeper with the ball at his feet. So I don't expect to see that. I would like to see it tweaked a little bit, just so that we're not seeing these errors continue to build up, and even if it's just the case of for the next couple of weeks or next couple of fixtures, that Allsop gets a little bit more confidence back. But it just there seems like there's something that just isn't right with the philosophy, and it's not entirely wrong. Just needs that little bit of fine tuning.
Yeah, fair enough. And hey, don't sell yourself short. You're a veteran of 9 years on this podcast, so you've got a bit of football knowledge about yourself. Don't worry about that.
An expert armchair fan.
That's it. Well, look, Mark, go to the expert armchair fan now for your votes for this game.
Yeah, look, I kind of tend to agree with you. I think, at least from what you've said previously, I think Delap was the 3 points. He looked like the bright spark. I put 2 points for Twine, and I don't think Twine was necessarily spectacular, but he did have a couple of key shots on goal. And then I think I put Greaves for my 1. Again, it was kind of a difficult game to award points for, and I think it's probably because we just came away with such a frustration on the overall result. And as you mentioned, there wasn't any real outstanding individual performances. So yeah, that's probably how I would rate it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, I went Delap for the 3 as well. I thought probably had our best chances for the game and really grew into it after that first 30 minutes or so. Yeah, Greaves, I gave the 2 votes too. I thought had a pretty decent display. And if I'm not mistaken, no, that was the previous game. It was in Team of the Week. So no, that wasn't this one. And then Morton, I went for the 1 vote. I thought he was busy in midfield and pretty productive. But as you say, it's tough to come up with too many players deserving of praise. Well, we'll talk quickly on our player of the week before heading into the previews. And that player is Greg Doherty, who has really sort of fallen out of favour, I suppose, this season. I mean, really unfortunate with the injury at the start of the season. Although in some respects, I think there was a case to be made that if he hadn't been injured, he's probably getting sold in the summer. His 1-year extension got triggered, I think, with the intention of selling him before that injury. Well, I was a little bit surprised to see 125 league appearances for us, which feels like more than I expected. It's a pretty decent return for him, having scored 6 goals in that time as well. Signed all the way back in August of 2020, of course, in that COVID season from Rangers when we were relegated to League One. Had a fantastic season for us, especially in that League One season. But even in that return to the Championship the following season, I thought was quite a decent player for us. So I think in general, I think he's been a good signing, and I think he's just one of those players where he's just limited by his ability, and I don't think he can go with us. He's not one of those players that sort of rises to the occasion at each level that we sort of progress to. I think he's that sort of lower half Championship player at his best, which isn't to discredit him. It's just I think probably the level he's best at.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I think he's an outstanding League One player. I think that he's, I want to say that he's durable. Maybe he's not durable because he has been struck down with injury, but he's strong, he's fast. He's a player that really will throw his body around and certainly knows how to put a foot in and challenge in the midfield. He's got an absolute ripping shot. He's just power. He's almost like a kind of bulldog-like workman who just goes about his business and can kind of provide that spark, that agile flair. But with that being said, I think that he is an asset in a Championship rotation squad. I think that he's one of those people who, you can certainly put on for kind of half an hour, or if there's an injury, and he'll do his job. I think that in League One he would be, towards the top end. But yeah, certainly at this point in time, if you were to cast your eyes across the current squad in the midfield, it'd be really hard to make a case for him starting. And as you said, I don't think that's necessarily because he hasn't been performing. I do just think that as a player, he is his ceiling is one of those players. He actually reminds me in so many ways of like a Jackson Irvine, someone who is always going to do his job well, and you kind of expect what you have in that type of player, but you're never really going to see him do anything too crazy or go through a purple patch of scoring frequently in the championship, because it's just kind of seems a little bit beyond him.
It actually surprised me a little bit. I think when we signed him, he was only 23, so I suppose that makes him 26 or probably 27 now. He's got one of those faces. He looks a whole lot older than he actually is, but he's the sort of player I wouldn't be surprised if we do sell him in January, that he could do a job at like a Huddersfield or a Rotherham or that sort of club coming out of the relegation zone looking for survival, where, as you say, like he's a sort of solid 7 out of 10 each week, but you're not necessarily going to get a 9 or a 10 out of him. But yeah, look, I mean, he's essentially in his prime at the moment, so he deserves to be going somewhere where he can play more regularly. Even as you said, maybe it's a top promotion chasing League One side like I wouldn't say a Portsmouth, because I think their squad's quite good, but whether it's like a Peterborough or something like that, sort of chasing that top 2, could end up at a club like that. But look, it's been a really successful spell with us. Title in League One in his first season with us, and then staying up the following season. Won our goal of the season last year, of course, as well against Blackpool. So a really productive spell for him at the club, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens in January. But I suspect you'd agree he's most likely on his way out in January.
It's hard to see a path for him starting in the first team, and I think that's kind of as a player, as you said, in their prime, it would be hard to kind of want to stay at a place and fight for your position without any real visible way to get into that first team and start week in, week out. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him move, and I think it would kind of suit both parties as well if it were the case, and Rosenior does value him in the same way that you and I do. Yeah,
no doubt. Well, we'll crack on then with our previews. With of course, Middlesbrough tomorrow morning, so quite a small turnaround from this recording to the game itself. 7 a.m. here in Australia, which is a really nice time to watch the game. So looking forward to that one. Michael Carrick, of course, still the manager there, has been in charge since Wilder was dismissed last October or something like that. Only 2 wins in their last 5 as well. So they're sort of fluctuating in form. I think they've been hit with quite a number of injuries in recent weeks. I suppose, interestingly, sold Chuba Akpom in the summer to Ajax, replaced him with Latte Lath, who I think was playing in France previously, has managed to score a couple of goals recently, so starting to find the back of the net. Sammy Silvera as well, joining from your mob, Central Coast, is an interesting one. And of course, Glover as well, joining from Melbourne City. So a couple of Aussies in the squad to join Riley McGree, which will be interesting to see if Silvera can get on tomorrow morning to see how he does. But, we sort of alluded to it in that QPR review. It is one of those quite tricky games where I do worry that, we almost need a win out of this one, or maybe I'd say a result out of this one. Otherwise, it starts to become a bit of a worrying trend of defeats.
Yeah, what it does do as well is put you kind of outside that, that top 6 bracket around Christmas. And I know that, we've seen it recently. I think Coventry potentially came from, the cellar at Christmas time and ended up making a playoff appearance. But it is one of those things that, particularly in the way that, I guess the criticism of Rosenior has been, if you could harbour any, is that there's been too many draws when, we've been kind of chasing 3 points. And the fact that that's the case is wins do feel somewhat harder to come by on the back of, of 2 losses. If we were to lose again here and go through, 3 games without accruing any points, and it becomes somewhat disheartening when, we also factor in the, Jaden Philogene being out for 4 to 6 weeks as well. And you see a few teams start to kind of come from nowhere and start jumping you around the Christmas break, you can see how challenging that becomes. It's amazing what a win can do, and how quickly that will kind of stop the rut, where you've gone back-to-back losses, then have a really, positive performance and pick up 3 points. All of a sudden, you're looking to the weekend as a huge opportunity to, not only be kind of in the top 6, but kind of back into that like third, fourth, really looking up the table as opposed to down. So yeah, it strikes me as a really important game, given the fact that that around the 6 spots now is starting to get very congested. And as you said, there's so much football to be played in quick succession.
How are you feeling going into this one? Do you feel like we can get a result, or a bit more apprehensive?
Yeah, look, if you had asked me this morning, I would have said apprehensive. However, when you kind of, when you talk it out and you think through, the squad, you think about the opportunity that now comes. I really like that Rosenior was quick to mention in the press conference that it's his first back-to-back loss since he's been at the club. So obviously that's something that, he's prided himself on and has had it kind of in the back of his mind. So I do think that whatever's been happening on the training ground this week or since the QPR fixture, I think it will be, imperative. I think they'll be really kind of circling this fixture as a massive get right game. And I do think that, as you mentioned, there's some Aussie talent at Middlesbrough, but I do think across the board we need to have some confidence in our squad, and it's one of those opportunities that if you do beat Middlesbrough and straight away get that, like those 3 points and are able to go back into this weekend with a sense of optimism, you really start looking at the run of games as an exciting one. Like I think that, if you've lost a few games and you go, oh, we've got five games in the next 4 weeks or 6 games in 4 weeks, whatever it is. If you can win this one right now, then all of a sudden you want to play more football because you've got that momentum and you kind of, you're flying with a wet sail. And I think that's exactly what Rosenior will have in the back of his mind to make it a truly festive season for us. So I am optimistic. I think there's a huge opportunity. I'd be surprised if we lost. I'm going to target a draw. Sorry, that as well is negative. I think we're going to win. I wouldn't be surprised to see us draw, but I think it's going to be a positive result regardless.
Yeah, I think as I sort of touched on with the Philogene injury making us a bit more unpredictable, I think it will be interesting to see how Delap comes into this one as almost our focal point of creativity. I think it also gives Twine a good opportunity as well to be a bit more central to what we do. So it will be interesting. I mean, I feel like I've sort of commented on it before, but I feel like with Philogene sometimes he takes a lot of the pace out of the game, to his credit, in the sense that he'll sort of basically stand on the ball, work his way through the opposition and crack off a shot or pass it into the box or something like that. But that in itself slows the game down. And I do wonder, and you look at Delap by comparison, for example, when he receives the ball, will immediately turn and drive it at the defense or turn them inside out. He'll try and crack off a shot. He's much a higher tempo, fast-paced player. So it will be interesting. And I think Twine's quite similar to Delap in that sense. So it will be quite interesting to see if our attack in that sense becomes a lot more fast-paced. And I know one of the criticisms that people have had recently is that our attack has been quite ponderous at times. It will be interesting to see in that sense what we do in attack and how those alternatives to Philogene actually gel together, whether Connolly gets a start, for example, if he's fit enough to start as well. So I think there's a lot of interesting elements to this game, and it's quite hard to predict in that sense, not only how we line up, but also what the result will be. I mean, I'm certainly leaning towards a win as well. I think Boro are having a deceptively poor run of form at the moment with their personnel injuries and their availabilities. So I think in that sense, we really need to be targeting this as the 3 points. And I think the opportunity is there to do so. I'd hope that Jones is able to come back in. I mean, as somebody who's got a little one on the way in a couple of months as well, I'm quite conscious that if he wants to take a couple of weeks to spend some time with the newborn, that's, not to be discredited either. So fully prepared if it is McLaughlin and Greaves in the defence, then so be it. And we'll make do with what we've got. But I'd probably try to leave the side reasonably settled. Like, I mean, I'd probably look at if Lakilo's still out injured, maybe it is just Connolly potentially comes into the side and Delap either takes a wide spot or Twine maybe pushes wide and Traore starts central. Maybe if Connolly's not fit, maybe it's a Slater comes in on that left wing. I think would be the other option I'd look at bringing into the side. I think Slater before his injury was quite crucial for us. So he's a bit of a forgotten man in that sense. But yeah, I think those are probably the only changes I'd make if we... I guess I think I saw Vinagre's fit as well. So whether you put him up on the left wing is the other option.
I was going to ask you as a side note, I know that this isn't necessarily on the run sheet. How important is it for this period, do you think, for Twine? I think since he's arrived, there's a lot of speculation whether we've got the best out of him or how he's underperformed. It's probably more the narrative. Is this the time right now where you see that, obviously you're looking for people to stand up and kind of potentially shift in the way we're playing, because there's not going to be Jaden Philogene as a focal point. Do you feel that this is the environment where it's kind of prime for him to reveal himself, or do you think it's more likely to be a Slater kind of scenario?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's all of them really. Like you look at your Morton, your Delap, Twine, Slater, all of those guys in those attacking positions, I think have that opportunity now to really step up. And I look at the fact that Twine got that goal against Watford, which was a really well taken goal from the Delap layoff or tackle or whatever you want to call it. And then of course had a really great chance against QPR too that was well saved. I think he's definitely growing in confidence. He's got the ability. We know that he's got the ability. So I'd like to think that in the absence of Philogene, he'll really step up and be able to fill that creative hole that's left without Philogene on the pitch. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what he can produce against Middlesbrough. And I think that's kind of going back to my point about our unpredictability. I think in a way that's a really positive thing is when you look at the side and you look at the lineup, if it's a Delap, Slater, Twine front three almost, you've almost kind of got an equal threat from all of them where, and you got Morden in behind and Traore potentially as well. It makes it quite a potent front line rather than just having, 2 or 3 players standing on Philogene and nullifying a lot of what we do. So I think it's really exciting in that sense to see how we line up tomorrow morning. So I think I'm probably backing a win as well, but I wouldn't be disappointed with a draw. Hopefully not another loss, I guess. And then we've got Cardiff this weekend. So they're another side who I think they're either above us or just below us in the table now as well. So another tricky fixture in that sense. 2 wins and 5 for them as well, similar to Boro. But going along quite nicely and managed by Errol Bullitt, who took over in the summer. I think he's a Turkish manager, which kind of has an irony of its own to it. But I think we've won our last 4 against them. We've got a good record against them. We had that win with Slater's double against them last season in the first fixture. So we seem to line up reasonably well on them. But I mean, I guess sort of looking at these games in conjunction, Boro and Cardiff, I sort of bracket them the same in the sense that they're both quite dangerous fixtures on paper, but also games that I think are really eminently winnable. And I think, as you sort of said before, if you win that Boro game, you suddenly go into this Cardiff game thinking, well, hang on, if we win this one as well, we're right back in that 3rd, 4th conversation just about.
And what it does do is I think that, as you said, I'm just looking at the league ladder now. You've got Cardiff who are actually on the same points as us, but ahead, I think, on goal difference. And then you've got Boro who are trailing us by 1 win. And not only do those wins kind of skyrocket us towards the top 6, is it really pumps the brakes on the teams that are in that logjam. I think the confidence then it probably has you thinking that you are, a top 6 team, like out and out, because you are beating the teams that are in that chasing pack. So I think this could be. I know that they're not 6 pointers just yet, but they are critical because of the magnitude of what they mean. I mean, I want to think like worst case scenario. If we were to lose these games back to back and you're looking down the barrel of 4 losses in a row against teams that, are in that logjam, well then all of a sudden the playoff picture looks like a pretty grim one. So it really does kind of have the makings in the morning of like a playoff type final fixture because because of what's at stake, even though it is early December.
Yeah, that's it. And that's, I've tried to veer away from thinking too much about it in that sense. But yeah, if we were to lose these 2 games, it suddenly does look like quite a grim picture about where we can end up. I suppose the only positive spin I could put on it in that sense is you're sort of heading into the January transfer window. And if there are deficiencies in the squad, if there are issues that we need to solve, you'd almost rather lay them bare at this stage of the season when you can do something about it and you can rectify them in January, rather than, maybe getting a patchy 1-0 win here or there and sort of hiding the deficiencies until you get to the end of January and everything falls apart. So you don't want to be in that situation, but the silver lining, I suppose, is at least it's the right time of season to do something about it.
Yeah, I would have to agree.
Score prediction for this one then?
Look, for the Cardiff fixture, this is back at home, isn't it?
Yeah.
This one is at the MKM. I think away to Middlesbrough, then at home Cardiff. Look, I would really back our chances against Cardiff there. I'm going to say I think we're going to win 2-0. That's kind of what I'm feeling. I think that, as you mentioned before, we do have a pretty nice run of form against Cardiff. We seem to be somewhat of a bogey team for them, and I think that we'll be itching to get back to the MKM, and especially if we're able to pick up points tomorrow against Middlesbrough.
I think 4 points from these 2 games I'd be very, very happy with, just coming off the back of these 2 losses. And especially against Cardiff, I think that's definitely the more winnable of the 2 games. I'd probably say maybe a 2-1 win against them would be what I'd be looking at. But yeah, look, fixtures coming thick and fast now. We are into the festive season. So thank you very much for joining me for this one, Logan.
Yeah, my pleasure, Alex. Good to be here.
And thank you, everyone, for listening in. We hope that you guys have a great festive period. We will be back, of course, next week. So, sort of in the week leading up to Christmas to cover the festive fixtures themselves and hopefully a couple of good results in these games as well. So until this time next week, come on, City.